Okay, so tonight we'll give a talk on WebSockets. Is anybody using WebSockets on their application? Awesome, good. Hopefully, if I do anything wrong, just give me some insight or tips there. I'm talking about just how to integrate with the WebSockets. WebSockets themselves are actually pretty simple. And just kind of give an overview of how you can add them to Reactjs. One of the things with any React app is you have typically a server dependency, right? You've got to talk to some API. The most common APIs are going to be REST, GraphQL. We did talk a while back on that. There's several others, but the most common is going to be REST. Oh, it slides out of order. I am hiring. Here's a link. So REST, I think everybody knows what REST is. It's a transactional request. You make the request, you wait for a response, you get your response. So, but the thing with the world, it works in real time, right? So that's where WebSockets come into play. If you need to get real-time communication from server, a common method that they used to do in the back a while ago was called long polling with browsers that are incompatible with WebSockets. You still do long polling where you just kind of keep this open HTTP connection. But WebSockets have come in to replace that. So they're really useful for real-time applications like Internet of Things, monitoring systems, collaboration systems, in-games, stock market ticker info, where you've got to push data to the client, chat applications, radio playlists. You can go on and on about real-time applications. So how does a WebSocket work? So basically, it's still over HTTP. You make just an initial call back to the server to do this handshake. You're going to upgrade and say, hey, I want to use a WebSocket connection. You still do it over port 80 or 443. You can do other ports, but recommend it's still 80 or 443. It supports SSL. At that point, you have a connection open, and it's just a socket connection. Messages can come back and forth. There's no request response. It's just whoever wants to talk can talk on the wire from the client to that server until one of the side closes that connection, whether it's the server or the client. As far as browser support, we've pretty much taken the stance that like any browser that's secure is going to support it, right? So a lot of the older browsers that don't support it, they're not secure, so you shouldn't be using them anyways. But all of the newer browsers do support WebSockets. So it's a pretty safe assumption to do that. There are frameworks out there, client frameworks that do provide fallback. I believe that some of them, I think sockjs may provide a fallback if it can't make that WebSocket connection, if you're using their server and their client together. But even so, I think some of those things are being deprecated and removed out of those frameworks to make them smaller. So common ones that are out there today are WS, Socket.io, sockjs. There's a few others, and these may even be based off other frameworks like Engine.io is what Socket.io is based off of, and I think Fay is what sockjs is based off. But these kind of higher level frameworks encapsulate that lower level socket communication. So you really don't have to understand what's going on and how to make or establish that connection because they just extract all the WebSocket data that you have to work. For this demo, I'm going to use sockjs. I'll explain later why I'm actually choosing that one, but they're really, I don't have a preference. They all seem to work. Does anybody have a preference on which ones they use? No? Just, yeah, they all kind of work. So let's go ahead and get started with the demo. Where am I in? Okay, so let's just do a brand new app. And so what I'm going to write here is a chat client. Call it chat client. Who out here has used Create React App? Pretty cool, huh? Like super simple to create an app real quick. So let's let that run. So if I go ahead and jump into that directory, what do I call it? Chat client. And I just do a quick yarn start. There it goes. Okay, it's running. So this is just basic boilerplate that they give you. So the first thing we need to do when we write a chat client is have some kind of user input. So let me start the server one more time. So in the app, we probably just need an input box, right? So we'll just throw that out there. Let's go to source, and then app.js is where like kind of our main application is the main component. But I'm going to create a chat component to run under that. We'll call that components. And we'll call this chat.js. So I need a new component. Which would be, and we'll just call that chat. So it doesn't really have anything yet, but we'll need some text box in there. Right, so that would be an input type text, and then a button, right? And that would be enough to give me, if I did that right, I'd just say send on that, but. So we have, am I running? What's up? Oh, yep, I got to add it back in. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, import that. Chat is not defined. Oh, import chat from. Cool. And so we have chat box. So not very pretty, but we can just add bootstrap around that whole thing. So, and then let's throw a bootstrap in our index. There it goes. Okay. So now we have a nice little formatted chat box. It's not doing anything yet. So now comes where we want to do server communication, right? So we could choose like a REST service, but we're going to do WebSockets here. And one of the things with WebSockets is there really is no contract. So you kind of have to define that on your own. In this case, my chat server is just going to echo everything that I send it. It's going to just echo it back down to the clients. So first thing we want to do is connect the sock client API. So we'll bring in sockjs. And then we'll just throw it in the constructor for now. So what we can do, actually, if I go out, let me talk about that real quick. So what is sockjs? So to implement sockjs, it's really this simple. So we won't import it this way. We'll just use the npm package. But this is really all the code you need to communicate with a server socket. That's it. And so what is this doing? By creating a new sock object, that's going to go ahead and establish that connection. And then you can subscribe to that with your function. And once that connection is successful, it'll call this onOpen function. In this example, it's going to just immediately send a message to the server test. And then any messages that come down from the server that get pushed, it's going to call this onMessage function. You can subscribe to, and then you can do whatever you want with it. In this case, they close the connection, which would then cause the close function to get called. So we take that same logic, we can just put that out here. And so I already have a server that's running, this chat server. And so do the same thing when that connection is open. I'm not going to send a message. I'm just going to throw in the console that connection is opened. Any messages get pushed from the server to the client. It's just right now just going to console log. And then if that connection happens to close, we'll just put that in the console too. And for just the simple sake of this demo, I'm just going to stick that into state. And we also want to add to our state messages so that we can kind of queue up those messages. Anytime the server sends us a message, we'll just throw it into this array, and then we can use that to render and display on our chat client. So let's see what that looks like. Oh, okay. That really won't look like anything yet because even though I have this form out there, there's nothing wired up to that button. So clicking on the button is not going to do anything. So let's just wire up that button. So on form submit. So we just wire that up real quick. Let's throw a constructor out there. And then, so what's going on here? So as soon as I click handle form submit, I'm just going to prevent default so the page doesn't reload on me. And then I'll grab message text and just send that up to the server using this object that I'm passing in state. The state that's we got to pass that in here. Communicate with that guy. So now if I type in a message, we see connections opened to the server. So if I send it, it sent it up, and then the server just simply echoed it back down. So I'm actually getting a message back from the server. So it's pretty simple, right? Like, it's crazy simple to add a socket app. Get a prop types warning. I can take care of that real quick. We're getting actions, which is an object. Oops. And then we're also getting messages, which is simply an array. Cool. That gets rid of that. So now what we want to do is, now we got that message, we want to render it on the page. So we'll just add that for rendering. That's pretty simple. We'll go into our render function on the chat. We'll just throw in a UL. Since I'm using Bootstrap, I can just say list root. So messages is being passed down into this just as a property, a prop. And so let's just grab that out of props. And that's all being handled. Basically what happens, actually it's not being handled. When that message comes in, we need to push that message into a state so that it can be passed into that component. So, so we are incoming stock messages. So basically what happened there is Message will come in, comes off E, so it's e.data, it's our events, and we'll just push that into a state. And so in the chat client, we now need to read that from the prop. So what are we doing there? So we're looking at the prop, we're just gonna map over that messages and throw that into an li. And then anytime you have a map function that wants a key in there, so we just have a counter just to throw a unique key on there. Okay, yes. So that message I can show real quick, just saying self, because I just referenced it here. Since this is inside of another function, I can't reference this because of scope. So I'll just say let self equal this. Yeah. So now what happens if I type in, send it, hey, I get a response back. Cool. So is this really working? Do you guys trust me that this is working? Like I just wrote the whole app. Probably not. So let's test it then. One of the cool things about Create React App is I can just push this to GitHub pages. So let's go ahead and do that. Go ahead and GH pages. So let's do that real quick. So what happens is when I created this app, I get this big, long README. So let's just search GH pages, and it tells you, if you follow these instructions, you can deploy this app to a GitHub pages. So the first thing is yarn add, we did that. The next thing is to add 2 scripts to my package.json. So let's do that. So it's a pre-deploy and a deploy. So basically pre-deploy is just going to run the build, compile it, and then transpile it, and then GH pages will actually push it up to GitHub. So let's go out to GitHub. Create a new repo, and we'll call it chat client. And we can just run this command. So git init. I don't need the README. You can make the commit. I won't worry about the commit right now. It's not necessary. But we do need to add the origin. And then the last piece to make all this work is in your package.json, you have to define what the home page is going to be. And so my home page will be chat client, which is the name of my GitHub project. And then focht.github.io is kind of standard GitHub pages that you're gonna have. So with all that done, I should just be able to npm run deploy. Yes, what is that? Oh, I think I killed my known host this morning. That's why I'm getting that. Okay, published. So let's go out to GitHub. And if we refresh, should have code out there. We do, sweet. So let's just check that out. So bfocht.github.com, minesweeper, let's do chat client. Did I spell that right?
Fleshing that connection help.
There it goes. Cool. Thanks. Pro tip. Okay, so who else wants to go to this page and type in a message? Let's see if it works. You gonna troll me? There it is. Hi, Sal. Hey, it's working. We now have chat client. I can type back in. Pretty cool, huh? That's pretty easy. WebSockets are simple. A couple things I will note. A couple things I'll note. One is if you look at my package.json, I actually don't have a reference to sockjs, sockjs-client. I said there was a reason I chose it for this demo. And the reason is Create React App actually ships with the client. As a good citizen, I probably should go back and actually say yarn add sockjs-client. You could probably get yourself into just so you know that you're actually going to be using this as part of your project.
So even the production node of Create React App packages sockjs?
It does. Yes. But I'll add it in. It packages several. I found that out on accident because I'm like, oh, I thought that was what was like broken, and then it wasn't what was broken because it was already there. Okay, so that's in there. App's working, but the reality is there's a lot of problems with this code, right? One is this isn't too bad here because it's not using any state, but I'm using state here, and I like to write stateless components. The other thing is I'm actually putting my socket client into state. That's probably not good either, right? That's not a good thing to do. So what else could we do? Well, we could introduce redux. That might be a way, and then we have global state, and then we don't have to have state in my component. I can subscribe to use the redux subscribe to events, and then manipulate my socket client that way. So let's try that. Let's do that. The first thing is to add a couple more folders. We'll need actions. We need our reducers. And let's just start there with actions and reducers. And I can explain what they are doing. So for this simple client, all I really am doing for actions is sending and receiving. There probably, if I were to make this a little more robust, I would add other actions for actually connecting to the server, disconnecting from the server. So one of the big things about socket clients is if you lose that connection, the client has to reconnect, and you have to keep track of that. I'm not going to do that in this app. I'm just going to worry about sending and receiving. And if you lose connection, you just have to refresh your browser. So I went and just stuck, for easiness, I just stuck the action types into the actions file. Dan Abramov says to create an action types file and just stick them all in there. He says you don't have to if it's a small enough app, so I've considered small enough app, so I don't have to. And then let's add our reducers, so what we're actually doing to the state. So let's do a new file. Like the how and the what. So for reducers, we'll import those action types, the receive message and send message. Because I'm actually manipulating state, I'm gonna have an initial state. So a couple things that I'm actually doing that's probably a little weird for Redux is actually passing my action through. I'll explain as to why I'm doing that when I get there, but it's mostly because I need to know whether I'm sending or receiving from the server on that action when I have my subscribe. So I'm just gonna pass it all the way through, so that's what you're seeing on this. So I'm putting action into my state. It's gonna be my last action is really what it's gonna be. And then and if the message comes in, it's a receive message, I'm going to push the message into my state. And if it's a send message action that came through, I'm not really going to do anything to the state other than just change, saying, hey, the client is trying to send a message. So got those in there. The next thing is actually create the redux store. So let's do that in, I want to create my redux store in my index.js. So let's create the redux store. Actually, I guess I still need to wrap the provider, though, to add my store around app. So this is just all boilerplate goodness. If you're writing a Redux app, you just have that in there. You're importing your provider, your create store, combine reducers, and then you actually combine the reducers. I only have one reducer. I don't need to combine it, but just have it. And then update my render function. So originally, the render function didn't wrap app with a provider. It's just app. We'll need to register a listener. So this is why I'm passing the action through. Chat. So this code here, oops. I'm going to call store.subscribe, which is just a function that's available in Redux on my store, my Redux store. And I'm going to grab, when any action is called, doesn't matter any action, whether it was send or receive, this always gets called. And that's why I'm passing in action, so that I know which action was being called. So I'm going to grab my state. I'm actually just going to grab messages from state. In that state, I have this action object, and then inside that, I'm just going to say the type. So my type's got to either be send message or receive message. In this case, if the user clicked a button that caused an action to dispatch, and that button they clicked is going to create send message. So if that happens, I have my switch statement that says, okay, when they click that button, let's send the message to the server. I don't have any reference to sock in here because sock is still inside my actual component. So let's kind of rip all that stuff out of the component. That component was here. So I no longer need to have this here. Let's just make this thing completely stateless. Actually, I don't even need the constructor at all. So it's just a stateless component again, which, since that's not there, we're going to pass props in. So, but I still need reference to sock somewhere, so I'm just going to stick that into my index code where my store is located. Do that, and actually the same exact code that was in the component, let's just add it back into here. So we're going to say sock-client. Yes. So it's the exact same thing. On open connection is going to console log. On message is going to console log, and then close. The difference was when the message came in, we pushed that message to state. Instead of doing that now in Redux, you have to dispatch. So let's go ahead and dispatch. And so we'll just call our store, our Redux store, which we defined right here by calling create store, and then passing in that reducer. And so that reducer has an action called receive. So let's take a look at our reducer real quick. Well, the action actually ties to the action folder, which then passes it to the reducer. So we have action receive, which is a type of receive message, which then goes to our reducer. Receive message. And that's where we actually push the text back to state now. That should be it. Oh, okay. So that's it for this now. This is now a stateless component. But I'm trying to reference props. Well, where do props come from? I got to get props from Redux. So, and you get that by having this function, adding a function called map state to props. That does all the magic for you there. And then I'm also going to bind my action creators. So basically, state's going to be fed into my component from Redux, and I'm going to turn around and make it a property, a prop that's messages, and just grab it straight out of there. And the one last thing is change out this. I have to use Redux Connect to export now. This is just standard boilerplate Redux Connect. And it's stuck all that, so I'm not changing that. This is here, but I want this version of it. So did this run? Let's clear real quick. Is there other stuff on there? There's all kinds of stuff. Oh, you're trying to script hack. That's fun. My app's not running. Let's start the app real quick again and see if it's working. So my server did crash. Cannot resolve React Redux. Yes. So I went through all this code and added all this in, but I never added it to my packages. So, yarn add. Let's add Redux and Redux, React Redux. Now we can yarn start. Yeah, it's connection open. Okay, cool. So anybody still on that page, send a message. Let's see if it's working with Redux. Hey, we're getting a message. Recompose all things. Yes. Cool. App's working. I could push this back up to GitHub. I'll push all the code up later. So any questions on the client? Yes?
So if you go back to your index.js, when you do the store.subscribe,
Yes.
philosophically, why didn't you put that in this reducer? The send method. Why wouldn't you just put the sock.send inside the reducer?
If I did, then I would have to bring in sockjs into my reducer.
Okay.
So, and if I was to refactor this code a little bit more, I would take this and put it in its own util class. And then this function also, this entire thing should go into probably that class, that util class. And I would pass in something like, when I do the, let's say I had this thing called, custom client or whatever, I would pass in an address and then pass in my dispatcher to kind of decouple that. And then that function that has the dispatch could then feed all the way through. But does that make sense? Is anybody curious about what the server code looks like? Let me bring that up. The server code literally was just copied straight from the sockjs server. Sockjs right here. That's literally the server code that I used. The only thing is I just passed this as undefined. I didn't need to. This is like fallback code. So if the server, if a browser doesn't support sockjs, it can feed this JavaScript back down to the client to give backwards compatibility, like for long polling. That's what that's doing. But I don't care to support older browsers. But basically, this just very similar. Has this, you create this object, and then you support on connection. And then, in my case, I'm listening on port 443. And you have this install handler. So that's my path. I think I changed my path to /chat. So that's what this is here. So whatever path there you assign. So yeah, that's the server. The only other thing I added code to this was this is only going to echo back on the exact connection that came in. So I added on the on. I'm actually taking this con object, and I just have an array, and I'm just pushing this con to an array, and then this con.write, I'm actually just doing a for loop and just taking all connections and just spamming it out to every connection the same. So I'm doing .write on those. That way it could hit all of the clients that are listening. So some considerations when using, these aren't the only considerations, these are some things I kind of thought up, is by default, they only support text and binary messages. So you're not going to be able to send JSON objects like you would like with a normal REST. What you have to do is stringify them, send them up, and then the client, the server, when they have to send it back down as a stringify. You got to parse. So there's potential overhead that you're stringifying and parsing, right? You're not getting that for free, but and you're gonna have to do all your validation stuff. You have to write that. There's no caching or compression built into sockets. It's just messages coming back and forth. So you could, because you can do binary, you could, if you have really large objects, you could compress it, I guess, on the server side and then send it down and use some kind of like JavaScript decompression framework. Messages may not come in the order that you expect them to come in. You're in charge of keeping track of your connection to open and close it. If you lose connection, you have to reopen it. So the recommendation thing here is, store that in state. You'll get an alert, connection's been closed, so you got to tell state dispatch, hey, it's closed, so I got to reopen it and do whatever you want there. And browser compatibility is also another consideration. Are there any other gotchas or pro tips with WebSockets you can think of? You're going to run into them, but this is the ones I kind of ran into when I was playing with them.
Yeah, so for iPhone, it actually kills the connection when you lose the focus. So if I click on the mobile button and lose focus with the browser, it's going to kill the connection.
Okay.
And sockets are going to through a full connection to see those are gone. If I go back to the browser.
And they're gone. That's another good gotcha, yeah. So it's real time, right? You're not really looking to, it's what's going on right now is the message you're getting in. So, yeah. Any other questions? Cool, thanks.